When I say the word time, what comes to mind? Maybe it's a reminder that we have to do something maybe this evening, maybe later this week, maybe later this month. For some, it may conjure up thoughts of the past. Maybe the question, where did time go? For others, it may be a reminder that we need to be a little more organized. We just can't seem to get things done on time. And for others, it may be the feeling that there's just never enough time to do what we want to do. We can be challenged by time, the constraints of time. We can periodically find ourselves running around the clock, trying to take care of things, dividing our energies, multitasking, checking in on our smartphones, and then figuring out how to scramble for some more time. And for sometimes it just appears that the day when we reflect on the end of it was just one big blur of activity. Whether we're a student, a parent, grandparent, an employee, a business owner, retiree, we might find ourselves in a situation where we just don't have enough time. Things just don't get done, and then we press ourselves to make better use of our time. For example, let's consider how people drive these days. So many drivers go 45 to 50 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone without even thinking about it, as if the speed limit sign is more of a suggestion than a law. So in the search for more time and day, we just tend to get caught up and rush everywhere, mainly out of habit, trying to get to our destination just a little bit quicker, even though there's no emergency and there's no reason to be there that requires our immediate attention. And those Prius drivers, they just drive you crazy, don't you? They're trying to go 40 miles an hour, but they go 38, and they're watching their little RVs. Yeah, that just drives you crazy. Now, I must admit, the other day I had more than enough time. I went in early to go to work. I had time, but what I found, I was being irritated at the traffic. It was just going too slow. Even though I had more than enough time to get there, I found myself wanting to change lanes and see if I could navigate myself through. And traffic was going speed limit. But I was so trying to make the most of my time. We live in a future-focused mentality, and the perceived need to get there quickly is there. We want to do as much as we can once we're there. Then just not one time either. It seems to be embedded in our culture. We live in a culture that worships overachievers, celebrates the ambitious. It's a culture that follows the time is money credo, a culture where growth and development, progress are to happen quickly, if not overnight. And really, the technology we have, which is expected to give us more time, actually seems to take time away from us. The proliferation of the internet has placed a wealth of information at our fingertips, opens up countless opportunities, creates millions of choices for us to evaluate and consider on a daily basis. Is there really ever enough time to read all the posts on Facebook or check all the Instagram updates? And aren't we a little bit irritated when our computer, we're working on it, that little round dot goes circular? Aren't we just a little bit irritated when that happens, that delays the need to get that information immediately? However, the ability to multitask is an essential skill that is very much in demand in today's busy world. A study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Human Perception and Performance, Volume 27, Number 4, indicates that multitasking may actually be less efficient, especially when it comes to complicated or unfamiliar tasks, because it takes time to shift mental gears every time a person switches between the two tasks. In reality, multitasking creates distraction. How many times have we talked to someone who was engaged on reading something on their phone and they did not even hear a word we had to say? And then their head pops up with a confused look and the question, what? At my place of employment, at my monthly directors meetings, I've required people to put away their phones and not bring their laptops to the meeting. Because what I found was, rather than being engaged within the topics that were being discussed at the meeting, they were doing other tasks. They weren't frittering their time away. They were trying to do other tasks that they normally would do, but they weren't paying attention. And it was impossible for me to get the group engaged on subjects that we needed to cover, because where was their mind? Phone. It was on their laptop. The first meeting I actually banned these items, the meeting went overtime because people were engaged. People had conversations. They had input rather than being distracted by the laptop or the cell phone. The emotional impact of technology is great too. The impatience and short temper that we have taken on at times because we're bombarded with information. It causes stress. It takes a toll on our physical and mental well-being. I would like to read an article from Psychology Today entitled, "Are You Too Busy to Be Yourself?" by Rod Judkins, January 20th, 2005. People convince themselves they are important and worthwhile because they're busy. It's a modern problem. Everyone is rushing around, but few are doing what they really want to. Many people spend their lives worrying about pleasing their boss or family, but rarely themselves. They spend their lives racing, but however fast they go, they never seem to achieve anything. Is it a 21st century problem? Is it? So it is. We are not given a short life, but we make it short. We're not ill-supplied, but wasteful of it. Life is long if you know how to use it, wrote Roman philosopher Seneca in his book on the shortness of life, written some 2,000 years ago. It could have been written yesterday. In modern life, busyness is a distraction from living. Many dutifully fulfill their obligations, but fail to do anything worthwhile. Ancient Rome suffered exactly the same problem. Seneca berates us for failing to see time as a valuable commodity. We value objects, but squander our most valuable possession. He could be talking about contemporary life when he says, "For suppose you think a man had a long voyage who had been caught in a raging storm as he left harbor and carried hither and thither and driven around and round in a circle by the rage of opposing winds. He did not have a long voyage, just a long tossing around." The article references that our time is our most valuable possession. Do we view it that way? When we were young, it seemed that time was endless. Summer break for me for elementary school seemed to take forever. In fact, it even went slow when I was trying to get that 18th birthday and especially the 21st birthday. It just seemed that time dragged on until I achieved those milestones. We viewed other things as being more valuable than our time. But as we age, we do start noticing something, that time does go past very quickly, too quickly. As a result for us, over time, time is becoming valuable in our eyes. As time has gone on for me, the goals of making enough money, taking care of a home, taking care of my family, saving for retirement, which are important and still are, have honestly taken a lesser significance in compared to how I want to make use of the time I have left. I look at my own hourglass, and the sand is a lot more on the bottom than on the top. And I want to make the most of it. A quote from physicianphilosopher.com is all too true. Time is money, but money cannot buy time. Time is not only a valuable possession, it's a unique one as well. We can't save it, can't retrieve it, can't stretch it, can't borrow it, can't loan it, can't stop it. We either use it and then we lose it. We can't call a timeout on time. It moves on. There are many inequities in this world, but the one thing we all have in common, rich and poor, young and old, is the amount of time we have each day. We all have 24 hours in a day, allotted to each of us. Doesn't matter who we are. Time is a resource, but it's non-renewable. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it's up to us what we do with it. Since we are products of this fast-paced society, some may tend to think that they've been shortchanged when it comes to time. It's not uncommon for us to hear comments like, I just don't have the time to do what I need to do, or I just don't know where the time goes. In our society today, people are pushed for more time. There's just a belief out there that there simply isn't enough hours in a day. And we can see that by the words that are frequently associated with the word time, such as urgent, priority, pressing. With all our modern conveniences, with all our technological advances, we should have more leisure time than any period in history. But unfortunately, the opposite is the case. When we look around, people appear to be wearied, tired, exhausted, even defeated. So why do people find themselves in what I would like to call a time crunch vortex of never having enough time? I would like us to consider 4 possibilities. First, it could be that people, and when I talk about people, I'm including ourselves, are pressed for time because they have a faulty view of values. In our society, the jam-packed schedule, the incredible number of hours, the heavy demands are supposed to show how successful or how important a person is. And one can erringly come to evaluate others' success on the level of activity in one's life. The busier the person is, the more important they must be, or the more successful they must be, right? Thus, we find ourselves maybe unwittingly emulating that behavior because we want to feel important or valued or viewed upon as being successful. The second possibility that people are caught up in the time crunch vortex is that a person can be involved in many things as a cover-up for failing to deal with important responsibilities. Sometimes running around trying to take care of all the little things that are going on, all the ancillary activities is sometimes an excuse to avoid the more challenging or important or difficult responsibilities we all face. We can justify our behavior, our procrastination, our avoidance for getting certain things done just because we are just too busy to get to it. A third possibility that people might find themselves in a time crunch vortex is because of the quest for materialism. People seemingly busy with distorted priorities, and they're never satisfied. Enough is never enough. They try to achieve the elusive goal of having more, but once they find out that they achieve the goal of more, there's another goal of more. There's always a need for more in one's lives. As a result, they pursue the goal of accumulating more and more things and never seeming to have the time for anything else. Or the fourth possibility that people might find themselves in a time crunch vortex is due to the fact that they place an overemphasis on what others think of them. The fear of man, as mentioned in Proverbs 25, verse 29. And people in this situation try to keep others happy, avoid disapproval. They avoid the disapproval from parents and spouses, children, or friends, or co-workers, at the expense of exhausting themselves. They make sure others are taken care of while neglecting their own responsibilities because they just don't have the time. In our performance-oriented society, activity that produces some kind of result is placed at a premium, and time is viewed from that perspective. Unless the activity can show an obvious yield, the time spent can be viewed upon as wasted. The problem facing society today is not the amount of time one has. It's how time is viewed and how life itself is viewed. In the Bible, there are two particular verses that I would like to review that discusses the use of time for those who are called today. But before I go into those two verses, we may have the impression that I'm going to give a message today that will focus on scriptures showing that how we fall short of our use of time. That I'm going to give a stoic lifestyle message. That God is some sort of wet blanket where fun and laughing can be viewed as shallow, immature at best, sinful at worst. One can have spiritual joy, and that is biblical, but to be happy and laugh, well, maybe not so much. That maybe if we spend the time living the life of a self-imposed perfection, praying all the time, doing all the right things, acting all quiet, holy, and serious, that God will be pleased with our actions. The concept of happiness and pleasure and holiness are not mutually exclusive. Time is a resource at our disposal and should not be wasted. Scriptures address this issue. But is play, leisure, rest, smelling the roses a waste of time? Is listening to the waves from the ocean beating on the shore? Is listening to the wind coming through the trees? Is enjoying music, watching a majestic sunset, celebrating at a wedding, getting together with friends or family, having laughter a waste of time? Let's take a look at a few scriptures. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 18. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 18. Ecclesiastes 5:18, and I'd like to read from the New Living Translation.
It states in Ecclesiastes 5:18 in the New Living Translation, "Even so I have noticed one thing, at least that is good. It is good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life God has given them, and accept their lot in life. And it is a good thing to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life, that is indeed a gift from God. God keeps such people so busy enjoying life that they take no time to brood over the past." Psalms 128, verse 1. Psalms 128, verse 1. Psalms 128, verse 1. Psalms 128, verse 1. "Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it will be well with you. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house. Your children like olive plants all around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord." Let's go back to Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 9. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 9. "What do people really get for their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on us all, yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's worth from beginning to end. So I concluded there's nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labors, for these are gifts from God." No doubt when Jesus walked on this earth, he enjoyed what life had to offer. If we look at Christ's first miracle, what did he do? He turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana to keep the wedding celebration going. People went to Jesus. Children went to him. Adults went to him because he was approachable. I don't think he was walking somberly all the time. I would imagine you could probably hear him laugh along the way. And by the way, laughter was something that was created in man by God. We are made in his image. But I'm not saying here at this point that we go to the other extreme either. We have been placed on this world that we haven't been placed on this world just to be entertained. Life isn't all about just taking on pleasure. 2 Timothy 3:4 talks about the end times when man will be lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. A lover of pleasure can reflect a misplaced focus. We were created to enjoy the blessings of this life, to delight in them, to enjoy them. But that enjoyment is to be God-centric. Psalms 37 verse 4 states that we are to delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. Our heart's desires are a function of delighting in God first. So far in this message, we have discussed time. Our society's fast-paced, never-ending, having enough time culture. That in our society, people find themselves in a time crunch vortex, never ever seeming to have enough time because of misplaced priorities. When we get down to it, the challenge of time is not the amount of time one has, but it's the view of time and reality, the view of life itself. We also reviewed that time is a valuable possession. It is a resource that is not renewable. Once it is gone, it is gone. Finally, time is a resource meant to be enjoyed. It's not all about conquering. It's not all about achieving. It's not all about accumulating at the expense of all else. With that as background, I would like to go on to the subject of the message today. It took me a little time, but now we're there. As I mentioned today's message, we will focus on two particular scriptures in our walk on this way. And I want to particularly focus on a particular phrase in each one of those scriptures that relate to time and our view and our use of it. This phrase, which is also the title of the message, is redeeming the time. Redeeming the time. Before I go into the two scriptures that discuss redeeming the time, I thought it'd be good to take a review of the concept of time from a biblical standpoint, from the book of Ecclesiastes. If we go to Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1. Once again, the title of the message is Redeeming the Time. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. Now I'm going to date myself. I can't help but thinking of the bird song, Turn, 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 every time I read that. But BibleStudyTools.com makes the following commentary on this verse that sets the stage what we'll be reading in the next 7 verses. Man has his appointed cycle of seasons and vicissitudes as the sun and wind and water. Purpose, as there's a fixed season in God's purpose. For example, he has fixed time when man is to be born and when man is to die. So there is lawful time for man to carry out his purposes and his inclination. God does not condemn, but approves of the use of earthly blessings. It is the abuse that he condemns, the making of them the chief end. The earth without human desires, love, taste, joy, sorrow would be a dreary waste. Without water, but on the other hand, misplacing an excess of them as a flood need control. Reason and revelation are given to control them. So let's go on to verse 2. Verse 2, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain, a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. Solomon is teaching that all the events and the activities of life illustrated in verses 2 to 8 have their proper time. Life is meant to be a series of experiences, some joyful, but also some sad. Life is never meant to be a panacea. It was also never meant to be a life of unending burdens. It has its ups, and it has its downs. The Hebrew word for season used in these set of scriptures is zaman, which means appointed time, an appointed time, a season. The Hebrew word for time is eth, which means an event, an opportunity. Within these verses, what we can see is some of these events occur only once in life, while others occur repeatedly. The important thing to recognize is there's a time for all different events of life, whether they are opportunities, responsibilities that we bear, the trials that we face. And there are situations where we're to take the time to do what's needed. But it's also, there's a time to enjoy life's blessings. Our time on earth is not to be that of only the downs, but there are times there will be the ups. There will be times of joy, but there will also be times of heartache. There will be times of birth. There will be times of death. This is what physical life is all about. So now let's examine the two scriptures that discuss redeeming the time. Ephesians 5, verse 15. Ephesians 5, verse 15. Ephesians 5, verse 15. Ephesians 5, verse 15. It says in verse 15, "See then you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil." Verse 17, "Therefore do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." In verses 15 and 16, Paul uses three Greek words or phrases that discuss the use of time we have in our lives. The first item I want us to look is the command to walk circumspectly. Most others translate this as be careful or walk carefully. The idea is, as we as members of God's family are commanded to continually take heed, to be alert, to be vigilant, to discern with God's Spirit. The second word to examine is redeem. And the word translated redeem is the Greek word exagorazo, which means to buy out of the marketplace. The picture of a merchant who diligently seeks to buy up the best bargains in the marketplace. The third word to examine is the word time, or kairos in the Greek, which refers to a fixed and definite period of time which something can be accomplished that cannot be accomplished after the time has passed. It speaks of opportunities, of events that come our way. Now, the word kairos is different from another Greek word for time, which is chronos. A sequence of moments was expressed in chronos, but it emphasizes the duration of time. An appointed time is expressed in the word kairos, without regard to length of time. Kairos is not clock time, but it's better understood as opportunities. It's the idea of taking advantage of opportunities that present themselves. It's the right time. That's the concept. In other words, the word time in verse 16 calls for us to make it our lifestyle, a daily walk, to be alert of the opportunities in our marketplace, the marketplace of life, our interactions with those around us. This includes our families, our friends, our co-workers, or people we just happen to interact with. As a result, we will begin to view people and circumstances not just as encounters, but as opportunities to make an impact as a light, opportunities to share the love of God in us, opportunities to share the hope that lies within us, opportunities to serve, opportunities to care, opportunities to listen, opportunities to encourage, opportunities to share a laugh, opportunities to cry together. It's not just stumbling along aimlessly in life, being buffeted around by circumstances. It's not a mad dash for what society values, ignoring everything that's going on around us. It's not letting time pass by, but it's being aware of the calling we have and the opportunities that come our way, that we are engaged at all times in the walk of the way. We have in our mind at all times that we are part of God's families, that we, young and old, are ambassadors for Christ, and that our actions and thoughts reflect that. McLaren's Expositories makes the following commentary on the phrase redeeming the time. And so here, redeeming the time does not merely mean making the most of moments, but it means laying hold of and understanding the special significance of life as a whole and of each succeeding instant of it as the season for some specific duty. It's not merely time, it is the time. Not merely the empty succession of beats of the pendulum, but these moralized as they were heightened and having significance, because each is apprehended as having a special mission, and the affording an opportunity for a special work. In other words, redeeming the time means that we understand the importance of the time we have been given. It's a gift. It's a limited opportunity, however, and we go through life with that in mind. We treasure the time we have been given. It's valuable, yet limited resource. The New Living Translation renders Ephesians 5, verse 15 as follows. So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. A second scripture that uses redeeming the time is found in Colossians 4, verse 5, if we would turn there. Colossians 4, verse 5. Colossians 4, verse 5. Colossians 4, verse 5. It states, walk in wisdom towards those who are outside, redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how to answer each one. Verse 5 is very similar to the wording in verse 15 of Ephesians 5 that we just read. Once again, it means to buy up the time. Whereas Ephesians 5, verse 15 discussed walking carefully as we redeem the time, Colossians 4, verse 5 mentions they were to walk in wisdom with those we interact with. Actually, these phrases introducing redeeming the time are similar. To walk carefully, to walk in wisdom. Again, not blindly stumbling along, rushing through life as we're trying to achieve and accumulate things at some frantic pace. It is to be thoughtful walk, knowing that our actions are seen by others. A companion to this verse can be found in Galatians 6, verse 10, if we would turn there. Galatians 6, verse 10. Galatians 6, verse 10. Galatians 6, verse 10. Therefore, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to all, especially those of the household of faith. The word for opportunity, again, right here is kairos. Rather than translating it as time, it is translated as opportunity. In other words, as we have the time, as we have the opportunity, we are to do good to all. This is also how we redeem the time we have been given. Verse 6 of Colossians 4, going back to Colossians 4, verse 6, also highlights the opportunity we have to use times with regard to our words. Once again, verse 6 of Colossians 4. First, in going back, our words are to be gracious, to be courteous, respectful of the other person. Secondly, our words are to be seasoned with salt. Mark Dunnigan commentary in the Bible says this with regard to being seasoned with salt. Both in Greek and Latin authors, salt was used to express the pungency and wittiness of speech. The applications would be, 1, our speech is to be free from corrupt language or obscenity. Number 2, our speech is to have a wholesome influence rather than being the type of language that is just about one step away from sin. Number 3, when we talk about God, Jesus Christ, the church, our salvation, the Bible, etc., our speech should be attractive, winning, positive, uplifting, enthusiastic, speech that is compelling, that the hearer desires another taste, speech that is not hard to listen to, and 4, speech that gets the point across perfectly clear. As members of God's family, we are to redeem the time, to make the most out of the opportunity in how we use our words. That includes words in emails, words in texts. Our speech, when we interact with each other, should be gracious, uplifting, positive. Make it clear. With that, we are to walk carefully and with wisdom, doing good to all. In this message today, we have reviewed the concept of time, of redeeming the time that has been given in this life. The problem each of us faces as we live in society today is not the amount of time we have, but our view of the time and of life itself. It's how do we use the time we have been given. And that's where the idea of redeeming the time comes in. Time is a valuable resource. We're to be constantly evaluating how we use time, how we redeem the time. What we have been given as we go through our journey as members of God's family. And these are not just related to the big events of life, but the seemingly insignificant times. A kind word, a note of encouragement, a smile, a tear. Redeeming the time is buying the time from the marketplace of life, making the most of the time we have been given. But it's doing so with balance. And I cannot stress that enough. Taking the time to enjoy the blessings that we've been giving. Redeeming the time includes taking time to rest, to laugh, to enjoy, to break bread together, to celebrate. When we think about it, the concept of redeeming the time is integrally related to the concept of stewardship. When we think of stewardship, we generally think of finances, managing assets, managing resources. But in light of this, isn't time a resource that we are required to manage? Redeeming the time tells us yes. Redeeming the time is managing the time we have been given, to walk carefully, to walk in wisdom, to take every opportunity to use time in a way that promotes God in our lives, to demonstrate to others the hope that lies within us, And we will find that focusing on redeeming the time will allow us to focus on what's truly important: our relationship with God, our relationship with family, our relationship with others, and not to be caught up in this crazy world of a fast pace that is lost and without focus. We are to enjoy our lives, the many blessings that we have been given. But that enjoyment is to be God-centric, which produces lasting results that last to eternity. There's a definition in Wikipedia with regard to stewardship that is poignant to our discussion at this time. Now, Wikipedia is not my usual source, but I did find it to be a clear meaning of the word. And it states, a biblical worldview of stewardship can be consciously defined as utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and the betterment of his creation. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Indeed, redeeming the time is part of stewardship. It can be viewed as taking the opportunity to utilize time that God provides for the glory of God and for the betterment of creation. The day of Pentecost, which we're entering into this evening, is a day that commemorates the outpouring of God's Spirit on his children. It reminds us of the special calling we have been given at this time. But the day is more than that. It should be a time when we evaluate our use of time in light of that calling. How we individually are redeeming the time that we have been given. I would like to conclude with the following quote that I came upon as I prepared this message, something to consider as we consider the concept of redeeming the time. Each day is God's gift to you. What you do with it, or if I may interject, how we redeem the time, is your gift to God.